Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigers.
Not sure if you're the same as me, but when you're on a little good run of fishing, that there's been some rain around at the moment. Warren, if you're listening to this, you'll know exactly. We got absolutely drenched yesterday and the windows of my car are steamed up with wet waders, wet coat and everything else. But I'm back on the river today. The rain has stopped. I got a day on an auction. It's the Mono auction, and wonderfully put together by Dave Smith and Patrick Lloyd, and it gives you the opportunity to fish in some places. And I managed and was very lucky to get a day's fishing. And the thing I really, really like about it is that it's esoteric, different rivers that you get to fish. And the really cool thing about this as well is that my good friend and fly culture designer, Jon Ogborne, is a member of the club. So we have met up this morning. We've had a big breakfast. We put the world to rights. We've probably drunk, or I've certainly drunk a little bit too much coffee. We're on the river now. I've poked my head over, and yesterday the tour, we watched it rise and colour up in a matter of minutes. We've looked over the bridge this morning. The river looks absolutely fantastic. It's real super small stream stuff. I've got even my bamboo rod, apologies Luke, was in the back of the car unpackaged because it had got wet yesterday, so I didn't want to put it back in and into its sock and it get musty and mouldy and everything else, so I've left that out, so please accept my apologies, Luke. But this is a real super small stream. I've got a 7-foot rod. John's just rigging up a 7-footer as well. I just tied a dry fly on this morning. We're not going to name the name of the river, but it's somewhere nearish Bristol, and I'll say no more than that. And like I say, those esoteric rivers that are just going about their business, and there's a hardcore of anglers that are fishing them, a little club perhaps, or a syndicate or whatever. And these waters, to me, I love fishing, and I've been lucky fishing on some of the lovely stretches of chalk streams of late, plus my home water of the Tour. But these little ones I really love, and it's got the added bonus that there's some grayling on. And this is a special river for a number of reasons. It's the first time I met John, and I've talked about it when we did the podcast together, that we fished together, and he made the most wonderful banana cake that we ate together. And that's where the genesis of sort of the magazine came together. And then when it started to happen, I contacted John. So this river, to me, is special as well for a number of reasons, but it's just great to be back here today. I'm going to do my best to describe everything that's going on, as I always do, as best as possible. But I'd say the river's probably 6, 7, 8 feet wide, overgrown. You know, I'm just looking down from where we're standing on the edge. We put our leader on, and I'd tie up a new one, and I can't even see the river. We've got to sort of scramble through. And this, to me, is what I love so much about fishing, these little streams that you may not know so much about, and getting the opportunity to fish them. But John's just putting his stuff together here. But John, it's great to be back on the river with you. I know we were only fishing a couple of weeks ago, but it's great to be back on your home turf. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Yeah, no, really good. Yeah, it's just, yeah, I mean, it seems like, how long was it? 2 or 3 years ago? And it seems like yesterday, doesn't it? Which is always kind of a bit worrying. Time just goes by in a flash. I think it's worth saying that we're not talking necessarily about the name of the river for no kind of elitist reasons at all. It's a very down and dirty locals river. You know, we're almost certainly going to have a Labrador land on us at some point while we're in there, almost as likely a deer. That happens sometimes, but it's just that we do have an issue with poaching sometimes, so I just kind of have to be a little bit sensitive about that. But yeah, it's very much a kind of journeyman river. It's very special actually, but you know, not for kind of elite reasons whatsoever. So.
And I know I showed you some nasty dark shit when we were first down here as well, didn't I? That's gone even further, hasn't it?
You did. Yeah, well, the streamer method I'd not really used before, but actually there's a couple of pools where, unless it's mayfly, you're not going to see any fish in them because they're big and deep and still. I mean, big in relative terms for here. So, as you know, in the interest of science, actually pulling a streamer through just to see what's in there is interesting. And half the time, the fish won't take the fly, but they'll for some reason lose all inhibitions and come right up to your feet, and you can actually just see, well, okay, there are still some big fish in here. So, and oddly, that happens sometimes when you hook a little grayling, they'll follow it right in. They seem to get hypnotised by it. But yeah, hopefully we'll see a couple of those today, Pete.
Fantastic. And the grayling, like I mentioned, and it was interesting as we wandered down towards the river. You're saying, as many of you listening are probably aware of year classes and how cyclical grayling can be on a river, and you're saying we may be hitting it right from that point of view, from a grayling size point of view too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I first joined here back like 2000, no, over 20 years ago now, there seemed to be some real lumps. And I mean, lumps for here would be 15, 16 inches if you're really lucky, but really lovely, nice big grayling, and you'd see them as well. And that they just seem to have sort of drifted off. And then we've had periods when we've had loads of grayling, but they've all been 8 or 10 inches. More recently, lots of grayling, but quite small. But this year, some of the big ones have started showing up again. So you can course fish this river as well. And a friend of mine's very keen on a little bit of trotting. And he picked up one that was knocking on 17 inches recently. So it's nice to know that that they're back in. Yeah. So
that's great to hear. And to give you a background on the weather, we were having breakfast and there was a little bit more rain. The rain has eased right back now. The clouds are pretty low. It's pretty, I think it's 18, 19 degrees, something like that. We're into the second week of September. To put it in context for when this podcast actually goes out, it feels really warm. We've got rain jackets on as well, and I've just got like a t-shirt underneath, so it's pretty warm. I've just tied on a dry fly to start with. I remember the first time I fished this with John and thought, I'll start with a duo and see how I get on. But this time, we were talking about it, and since that period of time, 3-4 years ago, the way I look at the fishing is slightly different, and I may catch fewer fish today. We'll see. There may be some of those pots, or if we do get, because the water's very, very clear, that there is the ability to stalk a fish. And I remember the first time I came here, I sat on a grayling for quite some time and eventually managed to get it to eat a fly. And it may be that if I do see one and it doesn't want to show any interest on a dry fly, then I will probably hang a nymph on or just pitch a nymph and see how we get on. But that, again, as I've said many times before, my home river I don't have grayling in, so I always see those, no matter where I am, as a really added and welcome bonus. Standing in the river now, and I've had my first couple of casts, I'm looking up and the banks are really, where we sort of scrambled down, the banks are a good 6, 7, 8 feet high. River, like I described, and John described actually, as he knows it, about 10, 12 feet wide. I've sort of flipped into a really nice run, and this works really nicely, that John's a lefty and I'm a righty, so it kind of works really, really nice. I've stuck with the dry fly. I'm sort of, as I said, fishing some bamboo. John's got a duo on, looks like a clink hammer, and a nymph just a short distance below. I'd sort of thrown and pitched the dry up into the run along the back where I thought perhaps some fish might rise. We're sort of watching everything. There's still drops coming off the tree, which, if you don't watch closely out the corner of your eye, you might be mistaken, think they're rises, but haven't seen any signs of life near the surface just yet. Just looking round the corner here, the sort of river weaves around a little bit here, but I'm sort of standing to get out of John's way, and I'm sort of about thigh deep in the water now, and it's a mixture of lovely little riffles and runs. There's a willow tree overhanging where we're fishing at the moment. There's enough room to get a cast in, but not enough that you're going to pull a load off your reel and cast a long way. So I think the technique is be adventurous, try different stuff. Technically, you don't always have to do the perfect cast. You've got to mix and mend and do your utmost to get your fly to the spot with a minimal of effort. But it's looking really beautiful. It's like the vibrancy's been turned up. Everything's beautiful and green. It's quiet here and looks absolutely fantastic. But that's the first run through at the moment. It's clear enough that hopefully we'll be able to spot a fish if we see one, a grayling or a trout. Sorry, Freudian slip saying grayling first, I guess. And the next run up, we're going to go and have a look in. We've worked through that one a little bit, so the first one. So we're going to have a look at the next one now. We've fished through a few pools now, 2 or 3 of them or so. We haven't come very far. River's mesmerising. It's pretty clear. I wasn't fishing early on with sunnies on purely because it was a little bit darker, but putting them on has allowed me to spot some fish. And I've learned some things already. That the first, as I said, John's got a duo set up with a really short dropper and a tiny pheasant tail nymph on. And he was fishing a pool, and just as he lifted up, he had a grayling come and have a look at the nymph, as they often do in that case. And that sort of gave me a little bit of a clue as well. And he said, do you want to have a go? So I grabbed his rod with the duo on and did similarly, and sort of jigged a fly up through the pool and had a fish come and knock the fly. As is always the way with these things, when you're jigging them up and down, it's usually on the up jig, so it's harder to hit it. And so that one didn't stick. Then we got to another pool and we saw some fish at the back, and they were sort of kind of looking at the nymph but not really on it. And we moved a little bit further up into the pool, and by me moving a little bit further, I'm probably only talking 3 or 4 feet because they're pretty small little intimate pools. But there was some rocks from, I guess, years ago where they were trying to protect the bank have fallen into the river, and that created a lovely diversion in the flow, and flipped the fly into there and was fortunate enough to have a small grayling, and did the same again a little bit further up, and another one which just came off just at the net there. It was a relatively small one but beautiful little fish, and we've been looking, or I've been looking closely for any signs of rising fish and not seen anything yet. And it feels to me as though the fish aren't really hard on or that interested at the moment. They seem more, when you sort of get carefully into position, they're sort of a little bit more wary, not so keen to sort of snap at the fly if it's down there. And the ones I'd seen at the tail of the pool, as I just described, were sort of watching the fly down and had turned on it rather than the fly drifting over and they ate it. And that's given a little bit of a clue. So it may be still that manipulation of flies may be a good way of catching them in flatter water and then fishing those slightly faster bits where you'll get a better eat off the fish, where it has less time to think about it. But it is a really mesmerising stream. I'm sort of not even ankle deep in the water at the moment, so you can see everything. Fish super spooky. It's mainly roll casts that we're having to make to get into position. John's just ahead of me now, fishing a pool a little bit deeper. It's got a rock sort of semi slid down. And again, that's just breaking the flow a little bit, and he's just putting his fly exactly where it needs to be. And it like I say, it feels to me just at the moment that they're just not on it at the moment. There's not a lot of bugs on the water either. I wonder if it will be one of those sort of more nearer to lunchtime. I guess we're later mid-morning now. I haven't looked at my watch, and that always gives you a little bit of a clue if you're having a good time and you've no idea what the time is. It's probably about 3 o'clock or something silly like that. Wind's come up a little bit as well. Not that really matters on here, because we're so deep comparable to the bank, so that's not really an aspect of it, but you can probably hear that in the background. But yeah, it's absolutely fabulous. It's cool. Like I say, I always grayling have a special place because I don't get to fish for them as often, but yeah, great fun. It's been a similar sort of case. We've worked up a few more pools, and just feels like there's not a great deal going on. Again, half-hearted nips to the fly, mainly from smaller fish as we go through. That doesn't diminish my enjoyment of it. It's been fabulous, and fishing small streams, I think, really is one of my favourite things to do. It feels like the pressure's changed a little bit as well. When we started fishing, the air felt thick, close, and it feels a little bit thinner now. There haven't been many bugs on the water either, but it's some of these things when you fish small streams makes you think about your presentation, how you're going to do it without getting hung up. But also one of the things I think about is I sort of kind of play through what I'm going to do, and even to the degree of the strike, because there's so much canopy. Even when I sort of pitch the flies, and there's been a lot of roll casting, there's been a lot of bow and arrow casts, so there isn't that much room. And what I sort of kind of play through in my mind as well is, if I do get lucky with a fish, how am I going to set on it? But I'm really pleased that Jon's taken the rod now. I was on the verge of telling him off because he's been a fabulous host and has been keen for me to fish as much as possible, but he's taken the rod now, and he was telling me about a spot he's fishing to at the moment that he caught a very sizable trout that unfortunately broke him off in the roots. And it's, the gap, the river's probably 6 foot wide here, if that, and there is very, very little room to cast a fly at the moment. So it is bow and arrow sort of stuff. I'm looking downstream, there's plenty of ranunculus. We've fished through the pool below, actually, as I'm talking about it, as I look downstream, relatively deep. And again, I sort of added a little bit tippet to the duo setup just to make it change the fly a little bit, just to see, jigged it. And at the back of the pool, there's some smaller fish hitting it. I had a slightly nicer one come and have a look, but just wasn't that enthusiastic about it. So we've been sort of working up through. As I said, it's why I love fishing. I think fishing little spots like this and difficult to reach. Actually from downstream, a fish has just shot out from somewhere and swum up. I just saw its shape go up, and I could almost, I've got a 7 foot rod, and I can almost touch the other bank here. So it shows you how thin it is here. High banks, as I said, but really, really beautiful and lovely to be able to try and spot fish as well. We did see one fish rise, but it was in some faster water, and I thought the duo might work. I thought where we were pitching it to, it might actually just hit that nymph. It looked like it was eating emergers, but that's been about it so far. So, yeah, we can continue upstream on this wonderful little stream. One of the things I wanted to ask Jon, though, I was thinking about this as a member of the Fly Culture team, and I was also thinking of Perry, our artistic director, as well. Both left-handers, both incredibly artistic people. Do you think that there's something to do with that left side of the brain and the artistic side, Jon?
Yeah, I mean, that's in terms of enjoying the aesthetic of fly fishing, or because technically I'm sort of very, very average as an angler, but I do enjoy it. My flies would be, I think we talked about this previously on a podcast, but be kind of very artistic, impressionist flies. And I think my style of angling is fairly similar. And you get these guys who do all these, like, really dig in, almost like engineers, into breaking strains and set up all these experiments and all that kind of stuff. I tend to, it's more for me about, which I really admire and respect that, don't get me wrong, but I'm quite happy to come and just sit around here and chat and have the old cast. So is that left side of my brain? I'm not sure, Pete. I don't know. If it is, I don't think it makes me a better angler, but I certainly enjoy the whole experience. It sounds a bit bullshitty to say as an artistic experience, but certainly as a visual, at sea trout at night, there's a very central, you almost taste it, can't you, when the atmosphere changes and the fish come on. So yeah, don't know.
I was almost thinking, I agree 100% with what you're saying about from the fishing. I was also thinking about, from the design perspective as well, and the art and everything else that goes with it. And I see a lot of painters that are left-handed, that may be right-handed, but paint left-handed because it engages that part of the brain. Do you subscribe to that, or you were just left-handed, or you've always been artistic?
Yeah, I mean, it was always the only thing that I was really any good at school. So I didn't even really have to think. I was lucky in that respect. Just kind of went down that path. Yeah, I mean, there's downsides to having a kind of brain like mine, in that I'm quite forgetful. I see it in my daughter as well. Do you know what I mean? We're very spontaneous. And I think that's part of the creative thing. You get a kind of energy, and somehow it's got to work its way out. But if you need a kind of ordered piece of thinking, I really have to sit down and work at that, as you know. So yeah, I'd imagine there is something about that. Yeah.
Cool. And you may or may not have heard, and I was in the nicest possible way. You've been a wonderful host, and had to thrust the rod into your hand at the moment, and it's been lovely watching you fishing this stream, describing it to me. We're looking up now, and there's a little gravel, shallow part that runs into a as you move up the pool, a deeper bit onto the right side as we look upstream there, and it's a really magical, special little place. And they're making us earn them this morning, which I kind of like. And I know we were discussing off mic that I kind of like that they're not throwing themselves on at the moment, and it sort of tests you. And I always like it and prefer it when the odds are in the favour of the fish, which I really enjoy. But it's just such a wonderful little stream, and I can see why you love it so much.
Yeah, I mean, I really do. And we were sort of talking earlier as well about, because, I've fished it for 20 years now, how whether or not because we're trying to speculate on whether the fishing's fluctuated or it's got harder or easier, whether the fish are bigger now or bigger back in the day, and whether or not your kind of memory condenses a kind of greatest hits of all the times you've been up. Because I'm looking at this pool here, I remember coming up here with another member, Tony, in the winter grayling fishing, and seeing some absolutely, I don't want to get your juices going too much, but seeing some absolute lumps come out from under a tump here, which I can't remember seeing again. Now, whether they disappeared or whether, I don't know, the memory plays a funny thing, doesn't it? And but every time I come up to this pool, I just see those shadows and think, maybe this is the time, So yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? But it's a lovely stream. It's all the nicer actually bringing someone up here. I find that about Bristol as well. I've lived there my whole life, and I know it's lovely, and I never get bored of it. But you always really, your love for it really comes out when you've got someone coming to stay and you can show them around. Like today, just bringing you up here, you see it. I'm seeing it through your eyes, which is a real gift to me, actually, because it reminds me how lucky I am to be able to fish here. So
that's really cool, and I'm going to nick that one, greatest hits of fish. I know how you feel about Bristol because my daughter lives in Bristol as well, and we absolutely love it there. Very, again, creative place, and wonderful. This pool, I'm not going to take the rod out of Jon's hand. He's going to see if he can weave some magic in here, and we'll see how we get on. Joe, of course, has been the perfect host, and we walked under a bridge, and he said, this is a really cool pool. And it really has been. And I was very, very fortunate that it was funny. I changed my setup, and it felt we were having a discussion between the differences between what we felt was a New Zealand dropper and a duo setup. And I said, I wonder, I might just hang a nymph off the back of my dry, put a bigger one on. I'd been fishing where I'd been fishing recently, not yesterday, the day before. I'd been fishing a small stream, my friend Gerald, and there'd been stonefly coming off. And so I tied on something that replicated that, and it happened to be on my patch. And we'd seen a couple of stonefly, but I thought it doesn't really feel as though there's much going on the dry. So I tied a nymph to the bend of the hook, and lo and behold, a small trout took the dry, just to prove me wrong, as they always do. And we were having a little bit of a discussion about it, because I wonder sometimes when you do tie a nymph to the bend of the hook, that it does sit that dry a little bit nicer in the water, or anchors it a little bit better, perhaps. And a fish took that, and then I got lucky that a nice grayling took the nymph as well. So I've been incredibly lucky in this pool. I've been slightly concerned about what I've spawned. That Jon has tied a streamer on in exactly right, just below a small weir that had been knocked down. Exactly the right sort of method to fish that deeper water. Sadly, nothing whacked in there. But this was, as you said, Jon, a great pool. There's a stonefly just in front of us there, actually. And a great pool, exactly as you predicted. And it came up trumps. And again, that's the lovely thing, that I get to fish people with their home water, and they know the little nuances, they know the little spots, and it came up trumps. So thanks for that, Jon. It's been a great pool, though, hasn't it?
Oh, it's great. It's a real enigma, this one. It summarises so much about this river, I think, in that it gets hammered in the summer. This is all the locals come down and swim in here. and the one just above it, and all the dog walkers cross here, all the dogs come in for a swim. And, as anglers, sometimes that's a bit annoying, but actually we're growing to realise these people often are our allies. There's a lot of work going on in the local village now, looking at pollution, monitoring the river. Their eyes on the river, and quite often that's because they swim here and they've got that daily contact coming down with their dogs, and they're looking out at the river, and that's great. So we try and sort of work with them rather than get annoyed by that kind of thing. And actually, it's a minor inconvenience, really. But as I say, it's a bit of an enigma because it gets the most of that action, yet it's one of the best pools for fishing. And the fish, I guess, just get used to dogs swimming around after a while. And we've been very lucky today, I guess, because it's been raining earlier on. We've had the whole river really to ourselves, and we saw one dog well away from the water, but we haven't seen any dogs, so that's been great. This is one of those, because we've got the aluminium footbridge just up to our right here. It's just a single path footbridge. You get a lovely elevated view from up there into the pool, and sometimes when the river really finds down, you can see every stone. It's fantastic, and quite often you can see some really nice trout just holding station. We didn't see one of those today, but Pete's being very modest. He just had an absolute clunker of a grayling from this river. Really beautiful fish. So that's really good to see, and follows on from what we were saying earlier about the grayling going in cycles and how now there's a few bigger ones around. So I'm glad that was kind of that point was underlined by actually catching one of them. Well done, Pete.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the kind words. But also, I'd like to rewind a little bit about what you said about people in the river. And historically, and I've on my home river, I've been seeing canoes and kayaks suddenly appearing. I've seen people I think shouldn't probably be on there from a safety point of view. But that's a really valid point that if we're going to get something done about pollution in rivers, then we've got to be a bigger and louder voice. And I think that's a really pertinent point, John, so thank you for that. I'd said that I hadn't looked at my watch and I thought it was late to mid-morning. It's bloody 2:00, so we're going to go and have some lunch now and get back on the river as soon as we possibly can. So we've had a really, really good lunch courtesy of John. Parma ham, cheese, pickle has just been top drawer. I've smoked a really nice bolivar. So we're in good shape. We've got into a pool. We passed a couple of balls in a field that seemed pretty chilled out. Saw a fish rise. John again put us in the right spot. Saw a fish rise, cover it, and thankfully the trout took the nymph. We've just seen another one go, and John's casting at it now. I've made the classic mistake of leaving my rain jacket back in the car, and it looks like there's some rain coming through. But we're in a nice little corner pool at the moment. Wind's come up a little bit. Feels to me like pressure's. Yeah, John's got one. Nicely done, mate. Nice. Oh, nice. And he's got a grayling of about getting on a good half pound. Actually, a really pretty fish on the nymph. Just while we're talking, we'd seen him rise, and it's really nice when you're chatting away that some magic happens as well. So beautifully done. Slippery. Actually, he was quite an obliging one, John, wasn't he? He let you unhook him with ease, didn't he?
Yeah. What a sweet little fish. That was really nice, actually, because I don't know if it's the fish that rose when we first came around the corner, but it was near enough to there, wasn't it? But I was remembering in your last podcast, you said look for the bubbles in the rise. Could be a grayling. I didn't see any bubbles, but it was a grayling anyway, so that was cool.
Yeah, nice. And that's a nice way. As I said, it's a little bit later. Lunch ended up being later because we'd lost all track of time. But this, again, the river to me feels as though it's got a slightly different feel to it. Those gravelly pools that I've been describing earlier are still sort of there, but the pools now are a little bit longer. We're still having to roll cast. There's deeper pots, though, here. So you're sort of trying to spot these pots, land your duo in there. We're both fishing a duo at the moment, and that seems to be the most productive method for finding fish right now. But those ones that we've last caught actually were on the nymph, but they'd risen. But I think we'd sort of managed to cover the fish quickly, that the nymphs were still high in the water and the fish hit those straight away. So lovely little start after lunch. We've been catching a few more fish, and like I was describing, as anglers, we always try and figure out what the reason for it is. And I think the pools are a little bit longer here. Where we were fishing this morning, they were probably 10, 20 feet long. And the one I've just had a fish, to give you a clue, I've been able to make a normal side cast right the way up the pool and pick a brown trout out of there. And that's probably a cast of 20 plus feet. And I think that's what it probably is, that there's a bit more room for the fish in there, and a slightly bigger population. It may be it's later in the day and the heat's permeated through. Not seen much by way of hatch still. We were just watching a daddy longlegs get blown onto the water and see if that was going to get whacked, but it didn't. But it's been really, we've been sort of fish on, and then your buddy has a go, and it's a really fun way of fishing. And it's lovely, again, fishing with someone when it's their home water, that they want to explain the pools to you and where they've had fish, and I've really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. So yeah, just great. A mixture of some beautiful wild brown trout and grayling as well. I don't know, there's a lot more I could ask for, really. So this is a really interesting one. We've clambered and climbed up the bank. I've got a handful of note to self: never use a nettle bush to try and steady or balance yourself, because that can be a little bit uncomfortable. But we've managed to scramble up along the bank, and there's like a bunch of tree roots both sides that have formed, I guess they've encroached on the river, and they formed a gully that's probably no more than 2 foot wide with roots either side. Now, I got incredibly lucky. John said, well, flip one in there and see how you get on. And I got incredibly lucky and caught a small trout in there. And John's having a go now. And it's a fascinating, proper, if you're a small stream fan, trying to make a cast with a duo on into an incredibly narrow piece of water. You may hear the background that we're near the head of the pool. So it's like a funnel of about 2 foot wide, 1.5 foot wide, trying to land a fly down there, drift it down. Then when you hook a fish, and I was playing this small fish a few seconds ago, and I said to John, I'm glad you can see it was a trout, because it was just trying to take me into the root system the whole time. And it is just one of the reasons I love small stream fishing so much. And when I get home tonight, I'll have the nettle stings to remind me of the day, all those silly little things that make you love it so much. So I'm just watching John right into the head of the pool now and running his nymphs down to see if anyone is home at the moment. But yeah, one of the reasons I love small stream fishing so much. One of the things I really love about sharing a rod with somebody and the river is you talk about the fishing, and I've said many times before, you talk about many other things as well. And we just started talking about music, and I was asking, and I should mention and shout out John's son Jack, who sometimes when the sound isn't quite as good, I send the file over to him and he cleans it up and makes it sound a whole lot better. So I should say thanks for that. But he's also a musician, and his band Bingo Fury are really, really cool. If you like music, kind of like Simple Minds and really interesting, different sort of stuff, it is worth checking out. But John and I suddenly discovered that we both used to play in bands, and we played in bands that even played the same songs. And he described his as was it a really bad Commitments? Did you say? Yeah, a really bad version of the Commitments. And I was similarly a bad version of the Blues Brothers and stuff like that. And then both our bands sort of went in different directions and wrote our own stuff and went in completely different directions musically as well. And we started talking about that. And I still play keyboards a bit badly, I have to say. But it's been really good fun. And we were talking about, I remember playing this, I remember playing that. And that's what I love about this as well. And we're in a pool now they call the Tunnels, because it's a tunnel under a railway line. And we've had a bunch of fish out of here, and we've just been chatting, enjoying the whole thing. John's gone into dark arts again and has put on a streamer. We've had, I don't know how many fish out of this pool, but it's just been absolutely fantastic. And for me, again, captures friendship, captures fishing and everything else that goes along with it. But had some pretty fish, mix of trout and some grayling, probably slightly more trout than anything else. So we're just winding in now, and we ended on a stunning pool. You may hear the lovely gush or burble of the water as it passes over rocks. Had some trout in here, some really nice trout. We lost some flies on rocks. It's just one of those perfect places to end what I think is a perfect day. I've got to say a huge thank you to Jon for being such a wonderful, generous host, to be able to fish such a wonderful stream. I've no idea how many fish we caught. It didn't matter about that. It's just been such a great day. I know when I was talking about the bands and stuff, he was very keen to point out the musicians were fantastic. It may be his vocals that were probably lacking from his band, but I've just enjoyed all the chats we've had, the fish we've had, the fishing we've had, the lunch we had, everything that went with it. And hopefully, as always, as these podcasts come out, that's what it means to me, and I'm lucky to fish with people who feel the same way. And that's the really cool thing about it. As ever, these things just aren't edited. I've not done any retakes. Jon hasn't. We've just talked as it's come to us. We've talked about stuff and everything and nothing. And that's been the great thing about it. But it's 6 o'clock now. We fished a long day. And it's been really, really good fun. I'm going to drive back to Devon with a big smile on my face. The lovely smell of grayling on my fingers as well, which is always a treat for me. And it's just been brilliant. And Jon, thank you so much for showing me this stream again, for being able to spend time with you, which I always enjoy. And I know we talk a lot, but I enjoy fishing with you a lot as well. And it's just been an awesome day. Thank you so much.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for coming up. It's just been great. And I tell you what's made it for me, having shown off earlier about deer visiting the pools, we get to the last pool of the day and a pair of deer come across. So that's just crowned it off. And what a great way to end up. Yeah, cheers for coming up, Pete.
Thanks so much, bud. I've no idea how many we caught. Have you?
I'd say, no, I wasn't. You lose count, don't you? I wasn't concentrating. A few dozen somehow, I think. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. And thank you so much for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. I hope our fishing adventure, you'll enjoy listening to this. As ever, there'll be lots more of these in the pipeline. If you haven't already, check out the latest edition of Fly Culture. We're extremely proud of that. And thank you again to everyone who's contributed to it, to everyone who supports us, for the kind comments, and for buying the magazine. We greatly appreciate it. It's a passion of love for us. We really do enjoy putting that out, and it's lovely to see people's reaction when it arrives on their doormats as well. So thank you for that. This has been the Fly Culture Podcast. Thanks so much for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.